Welcome to Sleepy Story Facts, where tonight's gentle bedtime story invites you into a quiet, floating journey through the soft darkness around Jupiter. A relaxing story designed to help you fall asleep, to loosen the day from your shoulders, and to ease your thoughts into deep sleep as calmly as a moon crossing a field of silver clouds. As this nighttime story begins, there is nowhere to rush to and nothing to solve, only the steady comfort of calming narration, the feeling of your body becoming heavier and softer with every breath, and the peaceful idea that far away, in the cool and velvety reaches of space, a giant planet turns with patient grace beneath bands of cream, amber, rust, and pale gold. So before we drift any farther, allow yourself a small, quiet settling in, a gentle bedtime ritual of doing less and less, where you let your jaw unclench, your forehead smooth, your tongue rest softly, and your breathing becomes slow enough that each inhale feels like a tide arriving in moonlit silence, and each exhale feels like it is carrying away the last bright fragments of the day. If you like, imagine that your bed has become a quiet little observatory suspended in the dark, warm and safe, with blankets like soft layers of cloud and pillows like calm pockets of air, while beyond the ceiling, beyond the night, beyond the weather and city lights, Jupiter waits in immense stillness, not demanding your attention, but offering it a place to rest. Count nothing, force nothing. Simply notice how easy it is to listen when the universe is presented softly, because Jupiter, though enormous, can be met in a peaceful way, as a world of striped light and slow rotation, of storms seen from a distance so great that even turbulence becomes art, like cream stirred into coffee and left to settle into marbled swirls. This sleep story will move slowly, like a vessel gliding through dark water, and as we approach the giant planet, you may begin to sense how comforting scale can be when it is wrapped in silence, because Jupiter is so large that more than 1,000 Earths could fit inside it. And yet, from here, it feels less like a place of pressure and physics, and more like a lantern of muted bronze hanging in the endless dusk. Its gravity is mighty, yes, but our journey keeps a respectful, dreamlike distance, where everything feels light, where you can simply observe the soft curvature of the planet and the luminous haze of its upper clouds, and where facts arrive not as lessons to memorize, but as warm little lanterns to follow one by one into sleep. Jupiter spins very quickly for such a vast world, completing a rotation in under 10 hours, and that swift turning stretches its shape slightly wider at the middle, giving it a gentle fullness, like a sleeping top that never quite stops humming. Around it, the clouds gather in belts and zones, dark and light stripes painted by winds flowing in opposite directions. And though those winds can be powerful, tonight they are only something to watch from afar, smoothed by distance into ribbons of motion, elegant and slow. A grand atmospheric lullaby written across a giant sphere. Perhaps you notice the great red spot, that famous storm older than generations, wider than our whole Earth. And yet here, in this gentle bedtime telling it, is not fierce at all. Only a deep rose oval turning quietly within a field of softer colors. An ancient weather pattern continuing its patient dance, while we drift by in hush and wonder. Jupiter is mostly hydrogen and helium, the same simple elements that fill stars. And there is something deeply soothing in that thought, that this enormous planet is made largely of light ingredients, of ancient cosmic breath, gathered long ago and held together by gravity into a world with no solid ground in the way we know it. Only layers that thicken and deepen into mystery, but there is no need to descend. We remain in the calm outer dark, where the planet's faint warmth rises from within, because Jupiter releases more heat than it receives from the distant sun, glowing ever so slightly from the leftover energy of its formation, as if it still remembers being young. Nearby, moons keep their graceful appointments with time. Io, with its restless volcanic spirit, Europa, with its hidden ocean beneath smooth ice, Ganymede vast and noble, larger than the planet Mercury, and Callisto ancient and cratered, each moon a quiet room in a larger celestial house. In this bedtime story, we do not hurry to visit them all. We simply acknowledge their presence like distant lamps in a sleeping home, each one turning slowly around Jupiter, each one contributing to a rhythm older than human memory. You may feel by now that your own thoughts are beginning to orbit more slowly too, no longer racing, no longer pulling in every direction, but moving in broad and gentle circles, just as these moons do, held by something steady. And if a thought still flickers brightly, let it become one more star in the background, small and harmless, while Jupiter fills more of the quiet with its striped serenity, its soft colors, its layered atmosphere, and its immense, patient calm. This is the gift of a relaxing story like this one. Not to excite, but to cradle the mind in wonder so tenderly that wonder itself becomes sleepy, and science becomes a blanket, and the universe becomes a room dimmed kindly for rest. So we continue to float here, beside the giant planet, wrapped in velvet darkness, carried by gentle bedtime rhythms and the hush of distant space, until even the thought of drifting feels like too much effort, and all that remains is the easy sensation of being held in quiet, held in darkness, held in the slow and beautiful company of Jupiter, while sleep approaches as softly as starlight on cloud tops. Now that we have settled into the velvet quiet near Jupiter, this sleep story drifts a little farther outward, just enough for the great planet to share the darkness with its nearest companions. And in this gentle bedtime hour, with your breathing soft and your thoughts moving more slowly than before, we begin to notice the moons not as distant objects to catalog, but as pale lanterns gliding through a vast and restful night, each one keeping its own calm path around the giant world below. Jupiter, so large and softly striped, does not travel alone, and perhaps that is one of the most soothing facts about it, that even in the deep silence of space there is companionship, there is rhythm, there is a family of worlds moving together with such patience that the whole scene feels less like astronomy and more like a lullaby written in light. Closest in our imagination tonight is Io, a moon of warm gold and amber tones, a little world known for its hidden heat and constant renewal, where volcanoes reshape the surface again and again. And yet, from here, from the safe, dreamy distance of this relaxing story, there is no violence in it, only the peaceful idea of a world that never quite cools. A glowing ember turning quietly in the dark, a reminder that even activity can be gentle when held far away and seen through the soft lens of night. Beyond Io glides Europa, smooth and pale as frosted glass, wrapped in a shell of ice that reflects sunlight with a calm, silver brightness. And beneath that frozen surface, many scientists believe there may be a great hidden ocean, deep and secret, and quietly held under the moon's cool crust. And it is easy, in a nighttime story like this, to imagine that ocean sleeping beneath the ice like a dream under closed eyelids, still, dark, and undisturbed, except for the faintest slow tides drawn by Jupiter's embrace. Then there is Ganymede, broad and noble, the largest moon in the solar system, so large that if it circled the sun on its own, it might almost seem like a small planet. And yet, tonight it asks for no grand introduction, because size means very little in the language of sleep. Instead, it appears as a serene and dependable presence, a polished pearl in the blackness, turning with the unhurried dignity of something that has all the time it could ever need. Farther still rests Callisto, ancient and quiet, carrying on its face the memory of impacts from ages long gone, its surface dark and marked and old. But in this calming narration, nothing feels harsh or broken, because time has softened everything, and those old patterns become like the fine lines in weathered stone or the rings in old wood, signs not of damage, but of endurance, of a moon that has simply remained, century after century, in the soft company of Jupiter. As we float and watch them, these four great moons begin to feel like notes in a slow chord, each different, each lovely in its own muted way. And together, they create a kind of celestial balance that is deeply comforting to the mind, especially a tired mind ready to fall asleep, because there is such peace in things that know their path and keep it without strain. Long ago, when these moons were first observed through a telescope, they offered humanity a quiet change in perspective, showing that not everything in the heavens moved around Earth. And even that thought can be made soft tonight, not as a lesson or a correction, but as a gentle widening of the room, a slow opening of the curtains, a reminder that the universe is larger than our worries and calmer than our rushing thoughts often allow us to remember. Jupiter's gravity holds this moonlit family close, guiding their motions with invisible steadiness. And maybe that too is a soothing image to carry into deep sleep. The idea that there are forces in the cosmos that do not shout or demand attention, but simply hold, support, and shape the dance with patient consistency. Below them, the planet's cloud bands continue their dreamy rotation, cream beside cinnamon, muted copper beside pale ivory, all of it turning in under 10 hours, so quickly for such a giant body, and yet appearing from here as gracefully slow as silk being wound around a sleeping form. Somewhere on the far side of the planet, storms move through the layered atmosphere, and the great red spot continues its ancient turning. But from this distance, every storm becomes a spiral rose painted onto a lantern. Every wind becomes a brushstroke, every motion a kind of soft breathing. And as this bedtime story carries us onward, Perhaps you begin to feel that your own body is no longer separate from the rhythm of what you are hearing, that your chest rises and falls like a moon in orbit, that your thoughts pass like dim stars behind cloud, and that sleep itself is not something to chase, but something already approaching, quietly and without effort, just as Jupiter's moons approach and recede in their endless gentle rounds. So let the names themselves become soothing. Io, Europa, Ganymede, Callisto, like low chimes heard from another room. And let their motions reassure the parts of you still awake that there is no need to hurry anywhere now, because everything important in this dark and beautiful place moves slowly, returns faithfully, and glows just enough to be comforting before fading again into the hush, where this gentle bedtime voyage continues, and the universe, in all its immense scientific wonder, becomes softer and softer until it feels less like space and more like a cradle suspended in the night. As our gentle bedtime journey continues, this sleep story glides a little closer to Jupiter's painted face, not so near that the vast planet becomes overwhelming, but near enough that its great cloud bands begin to feel like rivers of silk laid carefully around a lantern of bronze and honey. And in the soft hush of this nighttime story, with your body resting more deeply now, and your breath arriving in calm, unhurried waves, you may begin to notice how even Jupiter's most famous storm can become part of a relaxing story when seen from a peaceful distance, because the great red spot, despite its size and age, does not need to be imagined as fierce tonight, only as a slow and ancient oval of rose, terracotta, and muted amber floating through the upper atmosphere like a painted petal, carried by currents too vast to be hurried. It has turned there for centuries, perhaps longer than human memory can easily hold in one clear image, a patient storm wider than Earth itself. And yet, from here, it seems almost tender, not because its winds are weak, but because distance has transformed power into pattern, motion into softness, and weather into art. Around it, the white and rust-colored bands of Jupiter drift east and west in alternating streams, each layer moving in its own direction, and together they make the whole planet feel alive in a deeply soothing way, as though it were breathing in long celestial rhythms that no clock could ever rush. You do not need to understand every detail to be comforted by it, though the science itself is quietly beautiful, because these cloud tops are made largely of ammonia ice and other compounds lifted high into the cold upper air, and sunlight falls across them so gently that they seem less like atmosphere and more like folds of fabric gathered in the half-light. Far below those visible layers, pressure increases and the gases grow denser, and still deeper the strange interior becomes more mysterious, with hydrogen compressed into forms unlike anything we know at the surface of Earth. But our calming narration never asks you to descend there, only to float peacefully above, where knowledge can remain soft around the edges, and wonder is enough. Perhaps that is one reason Jupiter works so well as a gentle bedtime setting, because it lets the mind think about immense things without feeling burdened by them. And in that way, this bedtime story becomes a kind of quiet shelter where scale is not frightening but reassuring, where a world so large and old and full of motion continues its turning without asking anything of you except that you listen and slowly fall asleep. Even Jupiter's gravity, which shapes the orbits of moons and tugs at passing objects with enormous authority, becomes in imagination a kind of soft gravity tonight, not because it is weak, but because we are held at a safe and dreamy remove, so that its influence can be felt as order rather than force, as a gentle structure to the scene, the way a lullaby gives shape to silence without disturbing it. In that hush, the red spot keeps turning, and you might imagine it as an old weather garden planted in the sky, its edges feathered by time, its center deepened into warm rust and dusky coral, while nearby smaller storms appear and fade like pale cream blossoms, opening and closing in slow motion. Everything moves, yet nothing feels hurried, and that can be such a relief to a tired mind, because here movement is not demand, it is rhythm, and rhythm is one of the oldest doors into deep sleep. Somewhere beyond the curve of the planet, the moons continue their calm rounds, Europa carrying its hidden ocean beneath cold brightness, Ganymede moving with grave and silent dignity, Callisto resting in age-dark stillness, and Io circling closer in its own strange warmth. But for this chapter, they remain like dim lamps at the edge of a large room, while Jupiter itself fills the center with striped serenity. The giant planet rotates in less than 10 hours, a remarkable fact for something so vast, and that quick spin subtly bulges it at the equator, giving the world a gentle fullness that makes it feel almost cushioned, as though even shape itself has softened in the dark. If thoughts from the day still linger, let them drift into these broad cloud bands and become harmless patterns there, thin as mist, and soon absorbed into the marbling of cream and gold. Let each exhale carry you farther from clocks and lists and sharp little worries, until all that remains is the floating view of this enormous world, lit faintly by distant sunlight, warmed slightly from within by old stored heat, and wrapped in a sky so layered and graceful that the mind begins to copy its calm without even trying. This is how a sleep story can work so quietly, not by pulling you anywhere suddenly, but by giving your attention something so large, so steady, and so softly wondrous that wakefulness loosens on its own. So we continue to drift beside the great red spot as it turns in patient silence, and the planet beneath us becomes less a destination than a cradle of motion and color, less a subject than a slow companion for the night, until the last alert corners of your thoughts grow dim and spacious too. And this relaxing story carries you onward through velvet dark, under banded clouds and old storms rendered gentle by distance, toward that lovely threshold where listening becomes dreaming and dreaming becomes sleep. Now, as this sleep story continues its calm and patient drift, we move to the darker side of Jupiter, where the distant sunlight grows faint, and the giant planet seems to carry its own quiet evening with it. And here, in the velvet hush above the turning cloud tops, another kind of beauty begins to appear, soft at first, and then slowly more luminous, like silk lanterns being lifted one by one in a great celestial hall. Jupiter has auroras, vast shimmering lights near its poles. And in this bedtime story, they do not flash or startle. They simply glow with the slow serenity of a dream unfolding, green and blue and violet in the imagination, while high above the striped atmosphere invisible particles meet the planet's immense magnetic field and turn that hidden energy into light. It is a soothing fact, perhaps one of the most relaxing facts of all, that even in a world so huge and far from home, there are still quiet displays of radiance, silent weather of brightness, curtains and rings of glow gathering over the poles where space itself seems to whisper against the upper air. You remain at a peaceful distance, never too close, never overwhelmed, simply floating in a warm cocoon of calming narration, while Jupiter turns beneath you like a great sleeping lantern, and at the top of that lantern, the auroras gather in patient crowns, steady and beautiful, brighter in truth than those on Earth. Though tonight they feel softer, translated into the language of a gentle bedtime, and a nighttime story meant to help you fall asleep. The giant planet's magnetic field is powerful, astonishingly wide, extending far into space. And yet, in this relaxing story, it feels less like force and more like shelter, like the rounded walls of a vast invisible garden holding streams of particles in slow and graceful patterns, guiding them toward the poles where they bloom as light. Perhaps you imagine those polar regions now as quiet domes above the worlds, hidden north and south, places where the darkness is not empty at all, but filled with faint color, where the sky itself seems to breathe in long, luminous sighs, and where every shimmer arrives slowly enough to calm the heart. Beneath those lights, Jupiter's upper atmosphere remains layered in cloud, still moving in bands of cream and amber and rust. But on the night side, those familiar colors seem deeper, more hushed, touched with indigo and shadow, as though the whole planet has wrapped itself in evening robes and invited you to drift beside it in silence. There is something especially comforting in knowing that Jupiter creates such wonders not with noise, but with motion, with fields, with particles, with the patient laws of physics unfolding over immense distances. Because science, when told softly, becomes one of the kindest companions for deep sleep, offering the mind something real and beautiful to rest upon. And so this bedtime story lingers here above the pole, where the auroral glow forms an endless oval of light, a luminous wreath turning with the planet. And if thoughts from the day return for a moment, let them dissolve into that glow, as though they were tiny grains of frost meeting warm air. Jupiter continues its quick rotation, carrying the lights around with stately rhythm. And though the planet spins in less than 10 hours, from where we float, everything still feels unhurried, because enormous things have their own pace, a pace the tired mind can trust. Somewhere far below, pressure deepens through layers of gas and mist into the mysterious interior, but our path remains near the serene upper dark, where the science stays gentle and the view stays open, and where you can simply notice how easy it has become to listen, how natural it is now to let each sentence arrive and pass without effort. The moons are still with us, us too, though they have drifted to the edges of awareness, little companions in the dark, And one of them, Io, quietly contributes to Jupiter's auroras through the particles associated with its volcanic activity, a subtle relationship between moon and planet that feels tonight less like a mechanism and more like a tender exchange, as if the family of Jupiter were helping one another make the night more beautiful. That thought can stay with you for a while, if you like. The thought that even across great distances there can be connection, there can be quiet influence, there can be beauty made not by one thing alone, but by many things moving in harmony. Your breath may be slower now, your body heavier, your mind less interested in holding onto edges, and that is perfectly right for this moment, because this gentle bedtime voyage was never meant to rush anywhere. It was meant to soften the world around you, to let the darkness become friendly, to let science become a cradle, to let Jupiter become a calm and glowing presence beyond the window of sleep. So we remain here for a little while longer, above the silent polar lights, while the great planet turns and the auroras make their patient circles, and all the vastness around you begins to feel less like distance and more like room, more like softness, more like the wide and tender quiet that arrives just before dreams, when the last clear thoughts begin to dim, when the mind loosens its grip, and when this sleep story, this relaxing story of storms, moons, soft gravity, and luminous skies, carries you onward with such lightness that falling asleep no longer feels like an action at all, but like a gentle drifting into a darker, deeper, kinder shade of rest. As this sleep story glides farther into the calm and silvered neighborhood of Jupiter, we leave the glowing polar lights behind us and drift in the direction of Europa, that pale and beautiful moon whose surface shines like quiet frost under distant sunlight. And in this gentle bedtime hour, with your breathing slower now, and your thoughts softened into wide, quiet circles, it feels natural to approach, not with urgency, not with bright curiosity, but with the tender stillness of a nighttime story meant to help you fall asleep. Because Europa is a world that seems made for peaceful wandering, a smooth and luminous sphere wrapped in ice, carrying beneath its outer shell the possibility of a hidden ocean, dark and deep and silent. An ocean tucked away under frozen layers, as though the moon itself were keeping a secret dream. From where we float, safely and serenely, Europa does not seem cold in any harsh way, only calm, only clear, only hushed, like a pearl resting in black velvet, marked by long, gentle lines across its surface, where the ice has shifted and stretched over ages, making delicate patterns that resemble cracks in old porcelain or threads in pale marble. And these markings, which scientists study so carefully, become in this relaxing story a kind of moonlit handwriting, a slow language written by pressure, motion, and time. Jupiter's immense gravity reaches all the way out here, and though that gravity is powerful, tonight it feels like soft gravity, like a cradle's pull. Because as Europa circles the giant planet, the moon is gently flexed by tidal forces, squeezed and released just enough that warmth may be created deep within. And that warmth may help keep the ocean below from freezing solid, and there is something deeply soothing in that image. The idea that beneath a still and shining, crust there may be hidden water moving in darkness, held in warmth by the patient rhythm of orbit, like a sleeping heart under blankets. In this bedtime story, we do not break the ice or dive below it. We simply float above and let the mind rest on the possibility, on the calm scientific wonder that a moon so bright and quiet on the outside may hold a vast sea within. One of the most comforting facts in all the Jupiter system, because it reminds us that stillness at the surface does not mean emptiness below, and that silence can be full of life, of depth, of hidden motion too slow and gentle to disturb the night. The ice above that buried sea may be many kilometers thick in places, and yet even thickness sounds soft here, as if the shell were a white quilt spread over dark waters, preserving them in patient secrecy, while space remains cold and clear around it. Europa moves through Jupiter's magnetic environment, and by observing subtle clues in that interaction, scientists have found more reasons to believe in the moon's ocean. But in our calming narration, those measurements become something almost lullaby-like, a quiet listening across distance, a way of learning by paying attention to small changes, faint whispers, delicate responses, and perhaps that too is a lovely thing to carry with you toward deep sleep. The thought that some of the universe's greatest truths are discovered not by force, but by softness, by noticing, by staying still enough to hear what the world is already saying. Around us, space remains open and velvety, Jupiter hanging behind Europa like a giant lantern of muted gold and brown, its cloud bands now distant and blurred into warm color, while the little moon before us seems almost luminous from within, though it is only sunlight on ice and the calm projection of your sleepy imagination. Even its orbit feels restful, faithful, and repeated, a circular promise kept again and again. And when the mind is tired, there is such comfort in repetition, in paths that do not need inventing each night, in motions so old and reliable that they begin to sound like breathing. If thoughts of your day return for a moment, let them rest on Europa's frozen plain as lightly as snowfall, and watch them become still there, no longer sharp, no longer demanding, just pale little traces on a moon already full of quiet. This is what a relaxing story can do when it moves slowly enough. It gives the mind a beautiful place to set things down, and so we continue drifting beside Europa, this serene companion of Jupiter, while below its smooth shell, the hidden ocean remains unseen and deeply comforting, a reservoir of darkness not empty, but full, not lonely, but cradled by tides. And all the while, the giant planet keeps watch from afar, holding moon and story alike in its broad gravitational embrace. Perhaps sleep is drawing closer now in the same way that night gathers over water, gradually, without edge, without announcement, until one moment becomes the next, and wakefulness simply loosens and slides away. So let Europa remain with you as a pale and faithful lamp in the distance, a moon of ice, of possibility, of slow tides and buried calm. And let this gentle bedtime journey continue to carry you through Jupiter's quiet family of worlds, where every orbit is soothing, every fact arrives softly, and every image grows dimmer and kinder. until your thoughts sink beneath the surface too, into a place as still and sheltered as an ocean sleeping under ice. As our gentle bedtime voyage continues through the soft and spacious realm of Jupiter, this sleep story carries us now toward Ganymede, a moon of grand and quiet dignity, a world so large and serene that it seems less like a companion and more like a calm silver-gray kingdom turning patiently through the dark. And in this nighttime story, with your body heavier now and your thoughts smoothing into slower, softer lines, Ganymede arrives not as something to study with effort, but as something to rest beside, something to let your mind lean against as if it were a cool stone warmed by distant sunlight and wrapped in the hush of deep space. Ganymede is the largest moon in the solar system, larger even than the planet Mercury. And yet, there is nothing boastful in its size tonight. Only reassurance, only the lovely feeling of being near something ancient and stable, and in no hurry at all. Because the greatest comfort often comes from things that simply remain. Things that keep turning without noise, without strain, without ever asking to be noticed too brightly. Its surface is a gentle patchwork of darker, older regions and lighter, grooved terrain, as if time itself had traced broad and delicate lines across the ice and rock. And from our peaceful distance, those markings resemble the grain in pale wood, or the folds in silk, or the quiet ripples left behind when a breeze has long since passed over a sleeping lake. There are craters here too, softened by age and distance into round, dim memories, and the whole moon seems to hold the record of its long existence without sadness. In the way a calm face may hold fine lines without tension, wearing time like a form of tenderness. As this relaxing story moves onward, you may notice how naturally Ganymede fits the language of sleep, because it is a world of slow layers and hidden depths, and beneath its cold exterior, scientists believe there may be an ocean as well, buried under ice, resting in secret darkness where no wind reaches and no daylight disturbs the stillness. And that idea, once again, is so soothing in the Jupiter system. This recurring pattern of calm surfaces and concealed waters, of quiet outer shells and inner places held warm enough to remain fluid in the cold. It is as if the universe keeps offering the same gentle lullaby in different forms, reminding us that beneath what seems still and frozen there may be movement, depth, and patient, lifelike possibility, not demanding to be solved tonight, only inviting the sleepy mind to wonder and then let go. Ganymede is also special for another quiet reason. It has its own magnetic field, the only moon known to possess one of its own so clearly. And in the tender rhythm of this bedtime story, that invisible field feels less like a scientific distinction and more like a soft blue shelter, an unseen veil around the moon, a silent boundary where charged particles are guided, and where faint auroral glows may whisper above the surface delicate signs that this large and noble moon carries an inner complexity all its own. Perhaps you can imagine it now as a pearl wrapped in a barely visible halo, turning through black velvet with Jupiter behind it like a muted lantern of bronze and cream. The giant planet's bands now farther away, less detailed, more like warm brushstrokes across the dark. Even from here, Jupiter's presence is felt in the soft gravity of the scene, in the dependable shape of every orbit, in the slow promise that each moon will continue along its path with no need for guidance from us. And maybe that is part of what makes a gentle bedtime story so restful. The way it places you among things that already know what to do, among worlds that do not worry, among motions that have gone on for ages and will go on still, allowing your own tired mind to stop managing, stop rehearsing, stop holding itself so tightly awake. If stray thoughts remain, let them drift down onto Ganymede's pale surface like tiny feathers of frost, where they can rest among the old grooves and quiet craters until they no longer matter, until they are only part of the landscape, and then fade entirely into the moon's patient stillness. This is how calming narration works best, not by resisting every thought, but by giving each one a larger, softer place to settle. And tonight Ganymede offers exactly that. A broad moon with room enough for silence, room enough for memory to dim, room enough for the listener to fall asleep without noticing the exact moment when waking loosens its last small grip. So we continue to float here beside this vast and peaceful world, while somewhere beneath its ice, the hidden ocean keeps its secret hush, while somewhere above its poles, faint magnetic lights may shimmer in ghostly quiet, and while all around us, the darkness remains kind, spacious, and velvety, the perfect cradle for a sleep story, a bedtime story, a relaxing story told so gently that science itself becomes a lullaby. And as Ganymede turns, with no rush and no need to impress, it teaches the softest lesson of all, that greatness can be calm, that size can be tender, that mystery can be restful, and that deep sleep sometimes begins not with forgetting the universe, but with feeling held safely inside its most peaceful motions, until the moon, the planet, the story, and your own slow breathing all seem to join into one steady and quiet orbit, carrying you farther into the dim blue comfort of night. From the calm silver presence of Ganymede, this sleep story now drifts farther outward into a deeper and older hush toward Callisto, the outermost of Jupiter's 4 great Galilean moons. And as this gentle bedtime journey carries you through the dark with steady and calming narration, you may feel that everything is becoming even quieter now, even softer at the edges, as though the universe itself were lowering its voice in kindness, so you can fall asleep more completely. Callisto does not shine with the smooth brightness of Europa, nor does it hold the same grand size as Ganymede. Yet, there is something profoundly soothing about it, because it wears its age so openly, so peacefully, like an old stone kept warm in memory, like a weathered path in moonlight, like a place that has never needed to hurry and has long since forgotten how. Its surface is one of the most ancient in the solar system, dark and heavily cratered, carrying the marks of immeasurable time. And in this relaxing story, those countless craters do not feel sharp or broken, but gentle and rounded, softened by distance into dim circles and overlapping rings, like raindrops once fallen into still water and preserved there forever in silence. As we float above this old moon, The patterns on its face begin to resemble the grain of ancient wood, the marbling of dark stone, the faded imprint of time laid down layer upon layer. And there is comfort in that, real comfort, because Callisto does not hide the passing of ages. It simply holds them calmly and without complaint, and lets them become part of its beauty. Somewhere behind us, Jupiter remains a broad and striped lantern in the darkness, now more distant than before, its cloud bands softened by space and time until they seem like warm brushstrokes on the far side of night. And here at Callisto, the giant planet's presence feels gentler still, less like nearness and more like a distant heartbeat, steady and familiar, guiding the rhythm of this nighttime story without ever disturbing its peace. Callisto orbits farther from Jupiter than the other Galilean moons, and because of that, it exists in a kind of outer hush, a quiet margin of the Jovian family where everything feels slower, wider, more spacious, and perhaps that is exactly what a tired mind needs as it enters deep sleep. Not brightness, not novelty, but room for thoughts to spread out and fade, room for breathing to lengthen, room for the day to become very small and far away. Beneath its old and darkened surface, scientists think Callisto may also hold a hidden subsurface ocean, another quiet sea beneath layers of ice and rock. And once again, the science arrives as a lullaby, as the soft, recurring idea that under still exteriors there may be unseen depth. Under cold surfaces, there may be preserved calm. Under silence, there may be something gently alive with possibility. Yet we ask nothing more of it tonight. We do not search. We do not descend. We do not disturb the moon's long and patient rest. We only drift, and in drifting, we begin to understand why ancient places can be so comforting, because they make our small human hours feel less urgent, less crowded, less worthy of worry. The craters below vary in size, some so large that their rings spread outward in pale patterns across the darker ground. And one of the most beautiful things about Callisto is the way those structures hold shape over such enormous spans of time, untouched by the kind of constant resurfacing that changes younger worlds, so that this moon becomes almost like a memory keeper, a quiet archive of impacts, dust, frost, and long celestial patience. In a sleep story, that patience matters. It eases the restless mind. It reminds the body that nothing important needs to happen right now. Callisto has already kept watch through ages so long they blur beyond easy imagination. And tonight it keeps watch with you too, not as a guardian in any dramatic sense, but as a silent companion whose very stillness makes your own stillness easier to trust. If any thoughts remain unsettled, let them land gently on the old moon's dark plains and fade among the crater rings, where they become as harmless as shadows in soft twilight. Let your breathing move in slow circles like orbit itself, returning again and again without effort. Let the sound of this bedtime story become part of the same quiet pattern. One more orbit, one more gentle return, one more layer of rest gathering over you like fine cosmic dust. And as we continue beside Callisto, at the edge of Jupiter's inner grandeur, the whole journey begins to feel more spacious and dim, more distant from the day, more wrapped in that serene and velvety darkness where a relaxing story can do its kindest work. Jupiter glows behind, the stars remain steady beyond, and Callisto turns below with ancient composure, bearing its old marks without heaviness, bearing its silence without loneliness, bearing the deep calm of a world that has nothing left to prove. It is enough, simply enough, to be here beside it now, to listen, to drift, to feel your thoughts becoming as wide and quiet as space itself, until the moon's worn and beautiful face, the far-off giant planet, and the gentle flow of this sleep story all merge into one soft and steady sensation. And you move closer to that lovely threshold where rest no longer feels like something you must seek, but something already gathering around you tenderly and without end. From the ancient quiet of Callisto, this sleep story now begins a slow and graceful inward drift, crossing the soft black distances of Jupiter's moonlit realm, until another world appears ahead, smaller, warmer in color, and quietly glowing in the imagination like an ember cupped in careful hands. And this is Io, the innermost of Jupiter's 4 great Galilean moons, a place known in science for its constant volcanic renewal. Yet in this gentle bedtime story, there is nothing sharp or startling about it, because from our peaceful and dreamy distance, even Io's restless nature becomes part of the calm, part of the larger lullaby of Jupiter and its family of worlds, where every motion can be softened by space, by silence, and by the slow rhythm of a nighttime story meant to help you fall asleep. Io carries colors unlike the cooler moons we have visited, with tones of gold, honey, pale saffron, muted orange, and soft brown spread across its surface in broad and delicate variations. And as we float above it, those colors seem less like rock and sulfur, and more like a quiet painter's palette resting under dim light, as though the moon had been brushed with warm mineral dust and left to glow faintly in the stillness. The science of Io is remarkable, because the moon is flexed by Jupiter's immense gravity and by the gravitational pull of neighboring moons as well. And that steady kneading from orbit creates heat deep inside, enough heat to make Io the most volcanically active world in the solar system. But tonight, even that fact arrives gently, as if the moon were not erupting in any dramatic sense, but simply releasing warmth, the way a banked fire gives off a soft glow through the night. From far above, volcanic plumes become feathery veils imagined against the dark, too distant to disturb, too graceful to frighten, rising and fading like breath on a winter window. And the lava flows that reshape the moon's surface over time can be thought of here as slow strokes of amber light, renewing the world again and again with patient artistry. There's something strangely comforting in a place that is always being remade, especially when it is viewed through the quiet lens of a relaxing story, because Io reminds us that change itself need not be harsh, that transformation can be rhythmic, that even a moon under powerful tidal forces can become beautiful in the retelling, softened into patterns of warmth, motion, and glowing color. Jupiter hangs enormous beyond it, striped in creams and rusts and old gold, filling much of the sky with a presence so vast that it feels almost protective now. And Io circles close to that giant world in faithful repetition, completing each orbit with a devotion so steady that the whole relationship begins to sound like breathing, like inhale and exhale, approach and return, pull and release. This is the kind of science that makes an ideal, gentle bedtime companion, because it offers both wonder and order, both mystery and dependable rhythm. And as your mind grows sleepier, you may find that Io's ceaseless orbit becomes a soothing thought, a reminder that some motions are so old and so consistent that you can trust them completely without needing to follow every detail. Even the moon's surface, marked by calderas and plains and deposits from volcanic gases, seems from here like a warm tapestry of circles and stains and softly blended shades, less a harsh landscape than a quiet abstract painting laid out beneath the stars. Somewhere on the edges of awareness, Europa still carries its hidden ocean. Ganymede turns with immense dignity. Callisto keeps its ancient outer hush, and all of them together form a kind of celestial family around Jupiter. But tonight, Io is the ember among them, the warm note in the chord, the moon that teaches how energy can still be serene when held within the wider calm of space. As this bedtime story continues, perhaps your own thoughts feel a little like that, little embers from the day, still faintly glowing, but no longer demanding attention. And one by one, they can cool and dim in the dark, not forced into silence, only allowed to settle naturally, the way drifting particles settle through still water. If any thought remains bright, let it become one of Io's distant plumes, rising lightly and then vanishing into the black, leaving no burden behind. Let each sentence of this calming narration pass over you as softly as Jupiter's shadow passing across a moon, gradual and cool, and almost impossible to notice in the exact moment of change. The universe here is full of forces, of gravity and heat and orbit and motion, but none of it feels noisy now. Everything has been translated into softness, into slowness, into the language of deep sleep, where fact becomes comfort and scale becomes shelter. So we remain beside Io for a little while longer, watching the warm-toned moon turn in silence beneath us, while Jupiter glows beyond like a vast and patient lantern, and the stars remain fixed in their quiet places. And in this scene of ember colors and enormous dark, of hidden heat and faithful orbit, the tired mind can finally stop gripping the day. It can loosen, it can drift, it can trust the great and gentle mechanics of the night. And as Io continues its endless circling through Jupiter's soft gravity, you may feel yourself circling too, not around any task or worry now, but around rest itself, moving closer with every breath, slower with every sentence, until the warmth of the moon, the hush of space, and the tenderness of this sleep story become one continuous feeling, carrying you deeper and deeper into the calm. From the warm ember hush of Io, this sleep story carries us into a quieter curve of space, where Jupiter's brilliance begins to thin into something more delicate, more secret, and more easily missed. And here, in this slow and soothing bedtime story, we arrive beside one of the planet's gentlest wonders. Its faint rings, those slender veils of dust that do not announce themselves with grandeur, but wait patiently at the edge of vision, like silk threads caught in moonlight, like the memory of light rather than light itself. And as your breathing grows heavier and your thoughts continue to loosen, this nighttime story invites you to rest with that softness, to notice how not all beauty in the universe needs to be bold. Because around Jupiter, there are rings so subtle they seem almost shy. A pale and dusty architecture suspended in the dark, shaped by motion, held by gravity, and made more calming by the very fact that they are quiet. Saturn may be the planet most people imagine when they think of rings, but Jupiter has its own. And in this relaxing story that feels especially comforting, as though the great striped giant keeps a private halo, a dim circle of powder-fine particles drifting around it with almost whispered elegance. And these particles, tiny and patient, owe their presence in part to the impacts and motions of small moons, which means that even here, even in a ring so faint it can nearly disappear into space, there is relationship, there is exchange, there is a soft family resemblance between the planet and its companions. We do not rush along the ring plane or look for sharp details, because this gentle bedtime journey is not meant for urgency, only for drifting. And from our safe and dreamy distance, the rings appear as translucent bands, one layer hardly brighter than shadow, another touched by a hint of silver, another fading into the black until you are not entirely sure where matter ends and darkness begins. And perhaps that uncertainty is soothing too, because when you are trying to fall asleep, edges no longer need to be exact. They can blur, they can soften, they can melt into one another the way clouds and darkness do when the room is nearly dark. Jupiter itself remains immense nearby, its cloud tops and old storms now partially turned away, its colors dimmed into bronze, cream, and soft brown by angle and distance. And from here, the giant planet feels less like a world to examine and more like a warm and watchful lantern, one surrounded by a ring of dust so light and understated that it seems like the universe practicing gentleness in the language of science. Rings are made of material in orbit, shaped by gravity and motion and time. But in the language of deep sleep, they become something even kinder, a cradle of circling lightness, a reminder that even the smallest fragments can gather into harmony when given enough patience. Perhaps that idea can settle over you now, that not every scattered thing must remain scattered, that tiny drifting pieces can find a pattern, that the mind itself, after a long day, can soften its separate thoughts into one broad, calm ring of quiet attention. As this calming narration continues, the ring glows and fades, depending on how the light touches it. And that rhythm is so gentle, it almost becomes a breath of its own, a slow shining and dimming that matches the sleepy rise and fall of your chest, until the whole scene feels joined together. Your breathing, the circling dust, the hush of space, the giant turning planet, all of it participating in one unbroken lullaby. Somewhere nearby, the smaller moons continue their faithful paths, contributing in their own subtle ways to the maintenance of this dusty halo. And the larger moons remain farther out in the darkness, each one keeping its orbit like a calm promise. But tonight the focus is on the almost invisible, on the delicate, on the beauty that asks very little except that you look softly and listen slowly. That is one of the most restful lessons Jupiter can offer in a sleep story like this, that the universe is not only grand storms and giant worlds, but also fine dust, faint structures, and quiet circles barely brighter than night. And sometimes those hidden details are the very ones that help the mind settle most deeply. If any thought still clings to wakefulness, let it become a dust grain in Jupiter's ring, weightless and harmless, turning gently until it no longer feels personal, no longer needs your attention, no longer asks to be solved before sleep can come. Let the ring carry it. Let the orbit smooth it. Let the darkness around it become friendly and immense. The farther we drift along this pale and fragile band, the more the planet's edges soften, and the more your own awareness may begin to soften too, as though you are no longer listening from a room or a bed, but from a quiet place suspended between light and shadow, where nothing urgent can follow. This is the heart of a gentle bedtime, of a calming narration, of a nighttime story woven to help you fall asleep. The slow exchange of effort for ease, of sharpness for blur, of thought for drift. So we continue beside Jupiter's faint rings, moving carefully and peacefully through that dusty curve of silvered dark, while the great planet glows like a muted ember beyond, and the black around us feels velvety, endless, and safe. And in that soft, nearly invisible architecture of orbiting dust, where every particle keeps its place without noise, your own mind is invited to do the same, to settle into a quiet path, to release the day, and to sink a little farther, and then a little farther still, toward the calm and tender center of sleep. Now, this sleep story returns to Jupiter itself, not to the bright attention of storms or the silver mystery of moons, but to something even gentler, the quiet idea of gravity, that invisible and patient presence that shapes the whole Jovian family and holds this nighttime story together with such tenderness that it can begin to feel less like a force and more like a slow invitation to rest. And as you listen, with your body softened by stillness and your breathing settling into a deep and unhurried rhythm, you may imagine yourself floating in the wide embrace of Jupiter's influence, far above the cloud tops, safely suspended in the dark, where nothing needs effort anymore. Gravity is often spoken of as weight, as pull, as the thing that keeps worlds in motion and moons in orbit. But in a relaxing story like this, it becomes something softer, almost cradle-like. Because from a peaceful distance, Jupiter's gravity is not a demand, but a structure, a steadying presence, a gentle hand laid beneath everything so that nothing drifts into chaos. The giant planet is so massive that it shapes the motions of dozens of moons, dusty rings, and passing fragments of ice and stone. And yet from here, in the velvet hush of a gentle bedtime, that same immense power feels quiet, almost maternal, as if Jupiter were simply keeping the night arranged in wide, slow circles so that every companion world can travel its path in peace. Below us, the planet turns with its familiar stripes of cream, amber, cinnamon, and soft bronze. And because we have now spent so long in its company, those cloud bands no longer feel distant or strange, but known, almost home-like, in their own celestial way. Broad ribbons of color moving through silence, while the great red spot turns somewhere out of view, and the polar lights continue their faint, luminous breathing over the hidden curve of the world. Around us, space feels lighter than ever, and perhaps that is the tender paradox of this chapter, that by thinking about gravity, we begin to feel more floating, not less, because once the mind trusts the order of things, it no longer has to brace itself against every thought. And once the body feels safe enough, it begins to surrender its wakeful grip and sink toward deep sleep as naturally as a moon settling into orbit. Jupiter's gravity helps protect the inner solar system too, drawing in or redirecting many wandering objects over vast ages. And in the sleepy language of this bedtime story, that fact can be imagined as a kind of distant guardianship, not dramatic, not heroic, only steady and old. The way a mountain stands between a valley and the wind without ever speaking of it, there is comfort in invisible support. There is comfort in knowing that much of what keeps the universe balanced does so quietly. And maybe your own rest can happen in the same way tonight, not through effort, not through forcing your thoughts to stop, but through allowing some larger calm to hold them, the way Jupiter holds its moons, the way orbits are held by curves too smooth to notice in any single moment. If you picture yourself drifting here, just above the highest haze of the atmosphere, you might sense that the planet beneath you is not hard or solid in the familiar earthly way, but layered and deep, and made mostly of simple elements, hydrogen and helium, gathered into a giant sphere that glows with old warmth from long ago. And that alone is such a soothing thought, that even a world of gas and storm and hidden pressure can become, from the right distance, a lamp of softness, a sleeping presence in the dark. The moons continue their paths somewhere around us, each one moving under the same broad influence. Europa with its hidden ocean, Ganymede with its quiet blue mystery, Callisto with its ancient hush, Io with its ember colors, and all of them seem calmer now, as though gravity itself had lulled them into a slower music. This calming narration does not ask you to calculate anything, to solve anything, or to keep careful track of where each body is, because the science has already done its gentle work, simply by showing that the universe can be ordered without being rigid, powerful without being loud, immense without being unkind. In a sleep story that matters, it gives the tired mind permission to stop arranging everything by hand. It offers the nervous system a wider pattern to lean into. It says that even in the dark, things can be held. Let that thought remain with you for a while now, soft and steady, as though it were a small moon of its own circling the center of your awareness. Let each breath follow it. Let each exhale lengthen under it. Let the bed beneath you feel like a stable orbit, and the darkness around you feel like open space, spacious and cool and completely safe. If any last restless thought appears, let Jupiter's soft gravity gather it gently and carry it into a wide, slow circle until it becomes only part of the background, no longer urgent, no longer bright, no longer close. This is the quiet gift of a nighttime story told beside a giant planet, that even the grandest facts can become restful when they are wrapped in slowness and spoken, as though the universe were dimming the lights for you. So we remain here, floating in the wide embrace of Jupiter's presence, while the planet turns below, and the moons continue their silent rounds. And gradually, the whole scene becomes less a place to observe and more a feeling to sink into, a feeling of being supported by something vast, patient, and beautifully beyond hurry, until this relaxing story itself grows lighter and farther away, and all that remains is the sensation of gentle orbit, soft gravity, and the deepening hush of sleep, drawing you down into its calm. As this sleep story moves into an even quieter hour, we remain in our gentle drift above Jupiter, where the planet's vast cloud bands pass below like long folded sheets of cream and amber silk. And in this soft and unhurried bedtime story, you do not need to do anything now except listen, breathe, and let the giant world continue its patient turning beneath you. Because the deeper this nighttime story goes, the less it asks of the waking mind, and the more it invites that lovely surrender in which each thought grows dimmer, rounder, and easier to release. Somewhere far beyond the curve of Jupiter, the sun is only a distant lamp, much smaller and gentler here than it seems from Earth. And yet, even that remote light finds the upper clouds and lays a faint glow across them, as though the planet were being brushed by morning without ever fully leaving the night. And there is something deeply calming in that, the idea of a dawn so far away and so softened by distance that it becomes not a beginning, not a signal to rise, but a hush of pale gold resting on cloud tops. The belts and zones of Jupiter continue their slow visual music, darker bands beside lighter ones, flowing in opposite directions with such quiet majesty that they seem less like weather and more like breath itself made visible. And as you listen, you may notice your own breathing beginning to follow that same broad pattern. One long inhale, one easy exhale, one gentle orbit of air after another, until the body no longer feels heavy in an ordinary way, but pleasantly anchored, as though sleep were gathering over you in soft atmospheric layers, just as Jupiter gathers mist and color around its hidden depths. No solid ground is needed here, no firm horizon, no edge to stand upon, because this relaxing story has carried you into a region where floating is more comforting than standing, where certainty is less important than rhythm, and where the science of a giant gas planet becomes a cradle of imagery, so calm that even the mind's last bright corners begin to soften and fade. Beneath those upper clouds, pressure increases through deeper and stranger layers, and still deeper than that the planet keeps its great interior secrets. But tonight, there is no need to go downward, no need to seek the unseen, because the visible beauty of the upper atmosphere is enough, more than enough. Ribbons of pale ivory, copper, honey, and muted rust curving away into darkness like fabric drawn around a sleeping world. Perhaps one band appears smoother than the last. Perhaps another holds tiny swirls and curls so delicate they resemble milk stirred into tea and then left alone. And if your thoughts drift across them for a moment, let them do so without resistance, because drifting is allowed here, wandering is allowed here, and even distraction becomes restful when there is nothing sharp to catch on. The giant planet turns in less than 10 hours. That swift, hidden rotation, continuing under every softness we have watched tonight. Yet, from where we float, the motion feels beautifully slow, slowed by distance, slowed by scale, slowed by the sleepy quality of attention itself. And that transformation is one of Jupiter's most soothing gifts. The way enormous energy becomes serenity when observed from a calm place. Behind us and around us, the moons continue their faithful paths, though we do not need to name them now, because they are becoming part of the background lullaby. Small companions moving through the dark with no need for announcement. While ahead of us, the cloud bands brighten and dim beneath that faraway dawn in a pattern so gentle, it almost resembles the rising and falling of a blanket over a sleeping chest. In this gentle bedtime, every fact becomes softer than it first appeared. Every immense scale becomes a comfort rather than a challenge. And the universe seems to understand that you are no longer here to admire it with sharp, waking curiosity, but to let it hold you in a slower, kinder form of wonder. If any trace of the day still remains, let it settle into Jupiter's upper haze, where sunlight and shadow mingle without conflict, where colors blur into one another without needing boundaries, and where old worries become as thin and harmless as distant vapor. This is the kind of calming narration that does not pull you forward, but lowers you gradually, like twilight entering a room. And so the story continues to soften itself, sentence by sentence, image by image, until even Jupiter's grandness becomes quiet enough to resemble sleep itself, immense, enveloping, and beyond the need for words. We drift along the curve of the planet now, as though following the edge of a vast sleeping lantern. And the faint dawn touching the cloud tops feels less like light arriving and more like darkness becoming gently translucent, a delicate silvering of the night that asks nothing except that you rest inside it. The more you listen, the more the scene becomes simple. Clouds and glow, dark and drift, breath and orbit, and perhaps simplicity is the sweetest thing of all at this hour, because the tired mind does not want spectacle. It wants softness, repetition, and room. So let Jupiter give you room now. Room in its sky, room in its slowness, room in its wide and patient turning. And let the hush of its atmosphere become the hush around your own thoughts, until nothing remains urgent enough to hold on to. The cloud bands pass below in their endless quiet procession. The distant light brushes them once more with pale gold. And this sleep story carries you beside that motion like a feather beside a tide. So lightly, so steadily, and so far from the day that you may already be crossing into dreams without noticing the moment of change, simply easing into deep sleep the way Jupiter eases through space, held by gravity, wrapped in darkness, and moving onward with serene and ancient calm. As this sleep story grows softer and more distant, we drift now along the long shadow Jupiter casts into space, that broad and silent corridor of darkness stretching behind the giant planet like a velvet ribbon. And in this gentle bedtime story, there is something especially soothing about moving through shadow rather than brightness, because shadow asks less of the eyes, less of the mind, less of the part of you that has spent the day attending to details. and instead offers a kind of cosmic dimming, a gradual lowering of all sharpness until only shape, breath, and hush remain. Jupiter turns below us, with its familiar bands now muted by the angle of light. The creams deepened into pearl gray, the warm browns into soft bronze, the pale zones into something almost like mist on old glass. And as the planet blocks the distant sun, everything around us becomes calmer still, as though the entire Jovian system has entered a quieter room. Even the moons seem farther away in feeling, their motions continuing faithfully beyond the dark, while we remain in this sheltered passage where the great world's presence is felt not only as light and color, but as absence of light, as protection, as a cool and gentle shade held open in the middle of space. It may help to imagine that this shadow is not empty at all, but full of rest, full of softened edges, full of the kind of darkness that makes a nighttime story work so well. Because in a relaxing story, the dark is never something to fear, only something to settle into, a blanket rather than a void, a hush rather than a loss. Beneath us, Jupiter's upper atmosphere continues its slow patterns, whether seen or unseen, storms turning, bands flowing, invisible heights giving way to deeper unseen layers. But here in the shadow, those motions seem even more dreamlike, as if the planet were still breathing in its sleep, while the light has simply stepped back for a while to let it rest. That is one of the gentlest things science can offer a tired mind. The realization that so much continues beautifully, even when we cannot fully see it. That order does not depend on constant illumination. That hidden things may still be calm, still be steady, still be exactly where they belong. If any restless thought remains with you now, let it move into Jupiter's shadow too, where it can lose its edges and become quiet, not erased, not forced away, only dimmed until it no longer asks for your energy. Let the darkness do the work. Let the shadow soften what the day left bright. As this calming narration carries you onward, you may begin to sense that the shadow itself has a texture in the imagination, not rough or cold, but smooth as felt, deep as still water at midnight, wide as a closed eyelid resting after a long day. Space here seems less like distance and more like room, more like a chamber made for whispering, where even the facts of Jupiter become quieter in tone and gentler in meaning. The planet is immense, old, made mostly of hydrogen and helium, warmed from within by ancient stored heat, encircled by moons and fine rings and invisible fields. And yet here, in this corridor of shade, all that grandeur settles into one simple feeling, that something vast can also be tender, that something powerful can also make a peaceful shelter simply by turning between light and dark. Perhaps that is why this part of the journey feels so restful, because shadow is a kind of permission. Permission not to see everything clearly, permission not to solve or name each passing thought, permission to let the mind become less precise and more like drifting cloud, more like low music heard through a wall, more like the half-formed beginning of a dream. Below us, the curve of Jupiter remains enormous and silent. And somewhere beyond that curve, the distant dawn still exists, still touching the far side of the atmosphere with pale light. But we do not follow it yet. we stay here a little longer in the cool hidden side, where darkness is generous and the story can move more quietly than ever. Your breathing may be very slow now, your body almost entirely still, and perhaps the words themselves no longer arrive as separate meanings, but as a kind of steady current carrying you along, much as orbit carries a moon, much as gravity carries dust through a ring, much as shadow carries the eye away from detail and into rest. In that soft current, Jupiter becomes less a planet than a presence, less a scientific subject than a companion of the night, and its shadow becomes a place where wakefulness can finally set down its last small lanterns. This is the hour when a gentle bedtime becomes deepest, when a sleep story no longer needs wonder in bright colors, because wonder has already done its work and can now fade into softness, into repetition, into the simple comfort of continuing onward through a darkness that feels safe. So we keep drifting through Jupiter's long and quiet shadow, wrapped in the cool hush behind the turning giant, while the unseen clouds below continue their patient motions, and the distant stars wait beyond the darkened edge, and everything, absolutely everything, seems to be moving more slowly now, more softly now, more kindly now, until even the idea of movement begins to dissolve, and all that remains is the sensation of being carried in silence through a great and sheltered night, where sleep is no longer ahead of you like a destination, but around you already, gathered like velvet, gathered like shadow, gathered like the calm and endless dark behind Jupiter. As this sleep story drifts deeper into the velvet calm beyond waking, we begin to feel the presence of Jupiter's wider family once more, not as separate destinations now, not as places to visit one by one with bright attention, but as a quiet choir of distant moons, each moving in its own patient line through the dark, each adding a nearly silent note to the great and soothing harmony that surrounds the giant planet. And in this gentle bedtime hour, when your breathing may already be slower than thought, and your body may already feel as though it is resting at the bottom of a warm and dreamlike sea, there is something especially peaceful in imagining that Jupiter is never alone, that all around it, dozens of moons travel faithfully through space, large and small, bright and dim, near and far, each one held within the planet's broad embrace of soft gravity, each one turning through the night with no need for effort, no need for haste, no need for any sound at all. Some of these moons are tiny and irregular, like little dark pebbles carried in long and tilted paths, and others are larger and calmer. But tonight, they do not need names or numbers, because a relaxing story, such as this, does not ask the sleepy mind to sort and catalog every point of light, only to feel the comfort of plurality, the comfort of companionship, the comfort of knowing that the darkness around Jupiter is gently populated with fellow travelers who keep their quiet courses as naturally as breath. From where we float, the great planet still glows below and beyond, striped in softened bronze and cream, though the colors now seem dimmer than before, as if the whole Jovian system were settling with you into a lower and quieter mode of being. And against that muted glow, the distant moons appear like small lantern seeds scattered through the black, never frantic, never sharp, only steady, each one an example of how beautifully the universe can move when nothing insists on being hurried. In the daytime world, the mind is often asked to divide, compare, decide, remember, answer, and return. But here, in this nighttime story, Jupiter's many moons offer the opposite gift, the permission to let things simply exist beside one another in calm relation, to let many thoughts become one atmosphere, to let the separate fragments of the day float out into a wider field where they no longer press so closely against you. Perhaps that is why this part of the journey feels so tender, because after storms and rings and auroras and hidden oceans, what remains is not excitement, but arrangement, not spectacle, but quiet order. A sky full of orbits too spacious to create strain. Even the smallest moon in such a system has a path, and there is comfort in paths. There is comfort in repetition. There is comfort in the idea that not everything meaningful must be dramatic, because these countless circlings, these dim returns, these old and patient motions have gone on long before this bedtime story began, and will go on long after words have faded into sleep. If you imagine the darkness around Jupiter now, let it feel less empty than before, not crowded, never crowded, but gently inhabited, like a wide house after midnight, where every room contains a faint and sleeping glow. Some moons are closer to the giant planet, tracing quicker loops through its invisible field, and others are farther out, moving with a slower and more remote composure. And together, they create a kind of celestial breathing, inward and outward, near and far, bright and dim, all of it held in balance by the same central presence beneath us. Jupiter, immense and quiet, does not need to call to them. It simply is, and they continue. That is such a restful form of relationship, one built not on noise, but on steadiness. And perhaps your own thoughts can begin to relate to one another in that same softened way now, not colliding, not competing, only drifting apart enough to become peaceful, like moons taking up their proper distances in the dark. This is how a gentle bedtime story can guide the mind toward deep sleep, by replacing the cramped rooms of worry with open space, by turning attention from urgency to orbit, by offering not a solution to every thought, but a wider sky in which those thoughts can become small and slow and beautifully unimportant. Somewhere among Jupiter's distant companions, there are little worlds with odd shapes, ancient surfaces, and long, cold routes through shadow. But tonight, all of them are translated into hush, into faint movement, into small companions that reassure rather than demand. You do not need to follow any single one. You only need to feel the overall music of their motion, the calm geometry of their circling, the way even complexity becomes restful when it is given enough distance and enough dark. So let the many moons of Jupiter gather around you now as a quiet choir without words, a chorus of soft, returning lights, and let their patient orbits lull the last wakeful corners of your mind into stillness. Let your breathing join them. Let your thoughts grow dim and separate and harmless among them. Let the giant planet remain below like a warm sleeping lantern. And let the whole great system continue its graceful turning without asking anything more from you tonight, until the moons are are no longer distinct until the rings and clouds and shadow all merge into one gentle feeling of floating order. And until this sleep story, this bedtime story, this calming narration of Jupiter and its serene companions carries you so softly into the dark that you no longer feel yourself listening at all, only resting, drifting, and falling at last into the quietest center of sleep. Now, as this sleep story grows dimmer and softer, we begin to drift a little farther away from Jupiter, not in any hurried departure, not as though we are leaving something behind, but in the gentle and natural way a thought drifts into dream, until the giant planet that once filled so much of our night now becomes a more distant lantern, still warm in color, still immense in meaning, yet softened by space into a calm and glowing companion resting at the far edge of awareness. And this may be one of the most relaxing moments in our bedtime story, because nothing new is being asked of you now. Nothing needs to be learned or followed closely. And all the beautiful facts we have passed through tonight, the storms, the moons, the rings, the quiet polar lights, the hidden oceans, the soft gravity, all of them begin to gather into one simple feeling of peaceful wonder, as if the whole Jupiter system were folding itself into a blanket of memory and laying that blanket lightly over your thoughts. The cloud bands are no longer sharp from here, but that only makes them gentler, turning the planet into broad stripes of cream, bronze, muted copper, and pale honey, colors that seem less like weather and more like lamplight glowing through layers of silk. And somewhere within those softened bands, the great red spot still turns, though now it feels less like a storm and more like a faded rose sewn into an old tapestry. One quiet detail among many in a world that has become too calm for urgency. Around Jupiter, the moons continue their faithful circling, yet they too have become more like notes than objects, more like the memory of motion than motion itself. And perhaps that is perfect for a nighttime story such as this, because when the mind is nearing deep sleep, it does not want sharp outlines or separate names. It wants the comfort of everything belonging together, of every orbit and color and fact becoming part of one large and tender rhythm. You may notice that your breathing has joined that rhythm now, perhaps without your realizing when it happened. Each inhale like a slow approach through dark space, each exhale like a quiet widening of the distance, until even your body seems to understand that it no longer needs to hold itself alert. If a stray thought rises now, let it drift between you and Jupiter like a small piece of ring dust, light enough to float, harmless enough to ignore. And soon it will settle into the greater hush along with everything else. This is the quiet gift of a gentle bedtime, the way it lets the universe become simpler as you grow sleepier, not smaller, never smaller, but softer, more blended, more forgiving to the senses, until the giant planet that began as an object of wonder becomes something more like a presence at the edge of a dream. Perhaps that is how Jupiter is best carried into sleep, not as a list of measurements or a map of features, but as a soft and mighty feeling, a striped warmth in the black, a world surrounded by patient companions, a place where even storms are old enough to seem calm. and where gravity can be imagined as kindness rather than pull. The farther we drift, the more the stars around Jupiter seem to breathe with it. Little steady lights arranged through the dark with no need to impress. And in their company, the whole sky feels more spacious than ever. A room without walls, a ceiling without end, and yet not lonely at all, because the giant planet remains there like a low lamp left glowing for you in the next room. In this relaxing story, space has become cozy, and science has become a lullaby. And that transformation is what carries the mind so gently from listening into dreaming, from naming things into simply resting among them. Somewhere in the depths of the planet, pressures remain immense, and the hidden interior keeps its old mysteries. And somewhere above the poles, the auroras continue their silent glowing. And somewhere across the moon's tides flex ice and stone in patient cycles. But all of that now belongs to the background of sleep, like distant music heard through warm walls, steady enough to comfort, soft enough not to keep you awake. Let Jupiter remain at that perfect distance now, not close enough to call for attention, not far enough to disappear, just present, just glowing, just turning slowly in the imagination, while the last bright surfaces of wakefulness begin to dim. This sleep story does not need to end sharply, because sleep itself does not come sharply when it is welcomed well. It comes as Jupiter now appears, gradually, beautifully, through layers of softness, through a fading of details, through a quiet merging of darkness and glow. So rest here in this final widening of the night, with the giant planet hanging in the distance like an old bronze lantern wrapped in cloud and silence, with its moons like tiny patient embers around it, with its rings too faint to ask anything of your eyes, with its storms now only patterns, with its gravity now only reassurance. And let every part of this bedtime story become slower and softer inside you. Let the words pass like faraway orbits. Let the images blur like cloud bands at dusk. Let the dark around Jupiter become the dark behind your closed eyes, safe and velvet and deep. And as we continue to drift outward, so gently that the movement can barely be felt, let the planet grow smaller, warmer, quieter, until it is only a calm point of striped light in the endless night, and then only a feeling of peace, and then only the faintest glow remaining somewhere beyond thought, while you sink at last, and without effort, into the still and tender center of sleep. And now this sleep story enters its softest and most distant turning, a final gentle bedtime drift in which Jupiter remains with you, not as a subject to study, not as a planet requiring attention, but as a quiet and luminous companion whose presence has become so familiar, so warm, and so calm that it feels almost like a thought you have always known, a lantern in the dark that never needed to speak loudly in order to comfort you. And as this nighttime story continues in its slow and relaxing way, you may notice that even the idea of travel has nearly disappeared, because there is no longer any real sense of moving from one place to another, only the feeling of floating within a wide and peaceful hush where the giant planet glows at a tender distance, and the whole universe seems to have dimmed itself for your rest. The stripes of Jupiter are now very soft, no longer clear bands of storm, and clouds so much as blended ribbons of bronze, cream, honey, and pale ash, as though all the weather of that vast world had been wrapped in silk and seen through sleepy eyes. And perhaps that is the kindest way to remember it now, not in detail, but in atmosphere, not in sharpness, but in tone. Somewhere within that gentle sphere, the great red spot still turns in its old and patient circle. Somewhere the auroras still shimmer above the poles, like quiet green curtains in a windless night. Somewhere Europa still keeps its hidden ocean under ice. Somewhere Ganymede moves with great and noble stillness. Somewhere Callisto holds its ancient craters in dark composure, and somewhere Io glows with ember colors under the soft kneading of tides. But all of those facts, all of those beautiful sleepy science facts about Jupiter, storms, moons, and soft gravity, have now become part of a single soothing memory, as though the whole Jovian system were humming one low lullaby just beyond the edge of thought. This is where a relaxing story becomes a true sleep story, where knowledge loosens into feeling, where science becomes a blanket rather than a lesson, and where calming narration no longer paints new pictures, but slowly blurs the old ones into a deeper and kinder dark. If you are still listening closely, let that be easy. If you are drifting in and out, let that be easy too. There is nothing to hold onto now except the softness itself, the slow and faithful turning of a distant world, the sense of being suspended in safe darkness with no task ahead of you and no reason at all to remain fully awake. Jupiter's gravity, which earlier felt like a broad and invisible embrace, now becomes even gentler in the imagination, less a pull than a reassurance, less a force than a promise that everything in this wide celestial place is still being held, still being guided, still moving in old and beautiful patterns without needing your help. And there can be such comfort in that, especially at the edge of deep sleep, because the tired mind does not want to be the keeper of every orbit any longer. It wants to rest, to be carried, to trust the larger rhythm. So let Jupiter keep the rhythm now. Let the moons keep the rhythm. Let the rings, the clouds, the shadow, the faint light, and the patient distances all keep the rhythm for you, while your breathing grows so slow and so natural that it seems to join them without effort. Inhale, and the giant planet glows softly in the dark. Exhale, and it drifts a little farther into tenderness. Inhale, and the stars around it remain steady and cool. Exhale, and they soften too, until the whole scene becomes less like space and more like the inside of a dream that has room enough for silence. If there is any remnant of the day still waiting at the edge of your awareness, place it now into orbit around Jupiter and let it move away from you in one long, quiet arc, becoming smaller with every breath, dimmer with every sentence, lighter with every passing moment, until it is only one more tiny object in a sky too peaceful to trouble the heart. This gentle bedtime has never asked you to chase sleep, only to float beside wonder until wonder itself grew sleepy. And now that moment has come, because Jupiter is no longer bright in the mind, only warm, no longer vast in a way that amazes, only vast in a way that soothes. The storms are soft patterns. The moons are soft lanterns. The science is soft music. The night is soft shelter. And you too can be soft now, soft in thought, soft in breath, soft in the quiet way the body sinks deeper when it finally understands that nothing more is required. So we remain with Jupiter for a little while longer, in this last fading orbit of imagination, where the planet hangs like a bronze and cream lamp at the far end of a darkened hall. And each second grows slower, and each word grows lighter, and each image loses a little more of its edge, until there is almost nothing left but the feeling of being safely accompanied through the night. This bedtime story does not need a sharp ending, because the best sleep stories do not end so much as dissolve. And so Jupiter continues to turn in silence, and the moons continue to move in silence, and the darkness continues to cradle everything in silence, while your own awareness becomes quieter and farther away, descending not downward, but inward, into the deep sleep waiting beneath all thought, beneath all images, beneath even this calming narration, until the last glow of Jupiter fades into the velvet distance and leaves you resting in the pure, slow, and lovely stillness of night. And now, this sleep story becomes quieter than quiet, softer than shadow, gentler than the hush between two breaths, as we continue our slow and dreamlike drift beyond Jupiter, where the great planet is no longer a world of details at all, but only a low and beautiful glow resting in the distance, bronze and cream and almost silver at its edge, like the last lantern left burning in a peaceful house after everyone has gone to sleep. And in this final gentle bedtime, there is no need to follow anything closely anymore, because the story has done what it came to do. It has carried you past storms made calm by distance, past moons made tender by darkness, past rings fine as dust, past hidden oceans and soft gravity and whispering cloud bands. And now all of it is blending into one broad and velvety feeling of rest. Jupiter turns far away now with a patience too deep to measure. And if you try to picture it, you may only see a soft oval of warmth suspended in endless night, not bright enough to wake the mind, only warm enough to comfort it. And that is enough, more than enough, because at this hour, the tired part of you does not need more images, more facts, more motion, only a sense of being accompanied through the dark by something vast and calm and kind. The moons are still there somewhere, circling in faithful silence, but they too have become faint and dreamlike now, more like a memory of small lanterns than moons with names. And the old storms have become patterns too soft to hold, and the auroras have faded into a whisper of color that might only be imagination. And even the rings, those pale and dusty threads, seem to have dissolved into the black, until the whole Jovian system feels like a lullaby heard from very far away, still present, still steady, but no longer asking to be understood. This is the softest part of a relaxing story, the place where the mind can stop reaching altogether, because everything important has already been placed gently around you. And now there is only the drifting, only the easy lowering into deep sleep, only the slow realization that you do not have to keep listening with alertness for the story to keep holding you. If a thought rises now, let it rise slowly and fade on its own, like a dim moon passing behind a veil of cloud. And if another follows, Let that one drift too, with no effort, no resistance, no need to shape it into anything, because this nighttime story is now wide enough to hold every last thought until it softens and sinks. Your breathing may be so calm now that it feels less like breathing and more like floating. One easy tide inward, one easy tide outward, and perhaps each inhale carries a trace of that distant planet's warmth, while each exhale carries you farther from the day, farther from rooms and clocks and names and plans, until none of those things matter very much, and all that remains is the sensation of resting in a darkness that has become completely friendly. Somewhere in the black beyond Jupiter, stars remain awake in their own quiet way, but even they seem dimmer here, gentler, farther apart, as though space itself were widening to make more room for sleep. And that widening can happen inside you too. A slow opening in which tension loosens, memory softens, and awareness becomes too spacious to cling to anything sharp. Perhaps now the story sounds less like words and more like weather, less like narration and more like a low current carrying you along. And that is perfectly right, because the best gentle bedtime is not something you finish, but something you float inside until sleep arrives so softly that you never feel the moment of crossing. Jupiter is only a final point of tenderness now, a calm striped ember at the edge of dreaming, and even that ember grows smaller with every sentence, smaller and quieter and farther away, until it becomes only a feeling, the feeling of something immense being peaceful, the feeling of the universe resting without urgency, the feeling that you too can let go completely and be held by that same old calm. Nothing needs to be remembered. Nothing needs to be followed. Nothing needs to happen next. The giant planet continues its silent turning without your help. The moons continue their silent orbits without your help. The dark remains deep and velvet and safe without your help. And you, at last, can become wonderfully unnecessary to the night's motions, free to sink beneath them, free to rest, while everything else continues in its own patient and beautiful way. So let the last soft light of Jupiter fade now into the distance behind your closed eyes. Let the stars blur around it. Let the whole sky become one smooth and sheltering darkness. And let this sleep story fade with it, not ending, only quieting, not stopping, only dissolving, until there is no more planet, no more orbit, no more image even, only stillness, only softness, only the deep and gentle dark, and the easy, effortless feeling of falling fully, finally, peacefully asleep. And now, in this final and featherlight continuation of our sleep story, we drift so far into the hush beyond Jupiter that the giant planet is no longer something to look at directly, but something to feel very softly at the edge of thought, like the memory of a warm lamp seen from another room. And in this gentle bedtime hour, when your breathing may already be deep and slow, and your body may already have forgot the need to do anything at all, the whole great journey through storms, moons, cloud bands, rings, auroras, hidden oceans, and soft gravity begins to settle into a single calm impression, a vast and tender darkness with one faint bronze glow resting far away inside it. Jupiter is still there, of course, still turning with its old and patient rhythm, still wrapped in bands of cream and amber and muted rust, still holding its moons in wide, beautiful orbits. But all of that now feels quieter than words, softer than images, and gentler than memory itself, because this nighttime story has reached the place where science becomes almost weightless, where facts become feeling, and where wonder no longer brightens the mind, but lulls it with a softness too deep to resist. If you try to imagine the planet now, perhaps you see only the faintest oval of light in the black, a smooth and distant ember floating in silence, and somewhere around it, like small thoughts too far away to disturb you, the moons continue their silent circling, each one faithful, each one calm, each one held in the same broad stillness that now holds you too. Europa remains a hidden ocean beneath ice. Ganymede remains a noble moon with its quiet blue mystery. Callisto remains ancient and softly cratered. Io remains warm with buried fire and ember colors. And yet none of them feel separate anymore, because sleep gathers things together, softens their edges, and turns many beautiful details into one long, low lullaby. This is the gift of a relaxing story told slowly enough that by the end, it no longer feels like a sequence of chapters, but like drifting inside one spacious breath, one that began beside Jupiter and now continues in a darkness so friendly that even the last little thoughts of the day can dissolve there without effort. If any thought still rises, let it rise the way a faint moon rises behind thin cloud, quietly, harmlessly, and then let it fade again on its own, because nothing in this gentle bedtime needs to be pushed away now, and nothing needs to be followed. The universe around Jupiter is doing what it has always done, moving in patient circles, glowing in delicate shades, keeping its old celestial time without haste and without noise. And in that immense calm, there is no reason at all for you to remain fully awake. The words themselves may already be growing softer in your mind, less like language and more like a distant current. And that is exactly as it should be, because deep sleep often begins when meaning loosens and rhythm remains, when the voice of the story becomes less important than the slow sensation of being carried. Imagine, if you wish, that you are now resting in a little pocket of stillness beyond the reach of any demand, while Jupiter glows so faintly in the distance that it seems to pulse with your breathing, brightening slightly with each inhale, dimming gently with each exhale, until breath and planet and darkness all become part of one quiet motion. No edge is sharp now. No sound is urgent now. No image needs to stay clear. The giant storms are only soft marbling. The cloud tops are only silk. The rings are only dust in the dark. The moons are only dim silver notes in a very old song. And you are no longer trying to follow them, only resting among them, floating in the peaceful afterglow of everything you have already heard. Somewhere far behind that distant light, Jupiter's shadow still stretches into space. The auroras still whisper above the poles, and the deep, unseen interior still keeps its mysteries folded inward. But all of those things belong to sleep now, not to waking attention. And they can remain exactly where they are while you continue to sink beneath the surface of thought, deeper into the soft dark, where even imagination becomes quiet. This is the slowest part of the bedtime story, the part where almost nothing happens except the deepening of rest, the widening of silence, and the lovely fading of all separate things into one sheltering night. So let Jupiter become smaller now, and softer now, and farther now, until it is no longer a planet at all, but only a gentle warmth somewhere beyond dreaming. Let the moons become still points, and then softer than points. Let the stars themselves blur into velvet. Let the whole great sky fold inward like a dark and weightless blanket, and as this sleep story quiets almost to nothing, let yourself drift with it, with no effort, no holding on, no need even to notice the moment when listening ends, because that moment can pass as lightly as ring dust, as silently as a moon crossing shadow, as gently as Jupiter itself turning through the endless calm, while you slip farther and farther into the deep, peaceful, untroubled center of sleep. And now, dear listener, this sleep story reaches its final and gentlest shore, where even the idea of Jupiter has become soft enough to rest inside, and where this bedtime story no longer needs to guide you anywhere at all, because you have already traveled so far through the calm striped glow of that giant world, through its ancient storms made peaceful by distance, through the slow lanterns of its moons, through the hush of its rings, and the secret comfort of hidden oceans. And now everything is fading into one smooth and tender darkness, the kind of darkness that does not feel empty, but lovingly full, like velvet folded over warm air, like the quiet inside a room after the last light has been dimmed, like the deep and easy silence that comes just before deep sleep fully opens. Jupiter remains somewhere far away now, still turning in its old and graceful rhythm, still dressed in those muted bands of bronze and cream and honeyed cloud. But it is no longer a world you need to picture clearly, no longer something to observe with any effort, because in this final relaxing story, it has become only a feeling, a slow and peaceful presence at the far edge of dreaming, a giant lamp of calm glowing, just enough to reassure you before it, too, begins to blur into the night. The moons remain with it, though they are softer now than names, softer than shapes, softer even than memory, little companions circling in silence, as they always have, faithful and unhurried. And there is such comfort in that quiet faithfulness, such relief in the thought that the universe continues its beautiful motions without asking anything more from you tonight. You do not need to keep watch. You do not need to follow the orbit of any moon or the turning of any storm. You do not need to hold the story together in your mind. You only need to rest here, breathing slowly, while the last traces of Jupiter drift farther into softness. If a thought rises, let it rise like a dim moon through thin cloud, and if it fades, let it fade without noticing when. If another thought comes, let that one be only ring dust in a very wide sky, harmless and light, passing quietly through the dark until it disappears on its own. This is the soft work of a gentle bedtime, not forcing, not correcting, not holding on, but allowing everything to become slower, farther, quieter, until even the mind's small, bright edges begin to dissolve. Perhaps now your breathing feels as wide as space itself, easy and slow, Each inhale like a tide, arriving without sound. Each exhale like a long drifting away from the day. And somewhere at the edge of that, breathing the great planet still glows, smaller than before, warmer than before, as though all the sleepy science facts of Jupiter, all the storms and moons and soft gravity had melted together into one last little ember of peace. The great red spot is only a faded rose now. Europa's hidden ocean is only a cool silver hush beneath imagined ice. Ganymede is only a noble stillness. Callisto is only ancient quiet. Io is only a distant warmth. The auroras are only a whisper of color folded into black. The rings are only a memory of dust. And all of it, every part of it, is becoming gentler than language can hold, gentler than thought can shape, until the whole Jovian night becomes a cradle of darkness and calm. This nighttime story has done its work slowly, just as it promised. And now it begins to release even itself, sentence by sentence, image by image, loosening its own edges so that you do not have to remain awake to meet the ending. There is no sharp ending here. There is no sudden goodbye, only a soft lessening, only a quiet dimming, only the sense of being carried farther into a stillness that has been waiting for you all along. Jupiter drifts farther now, becoming less a planet than a glow, less a glow than a warmth, less a warmth than a feeling of being safely accompanied in the dark. The stars around it blur into a smooth and velvety field. Space itself becomes cozy, hushed, almost like the inside of a dream before images fully form. And if you are still listening, then listen lightly. If you are already half asleep, then drift more deeply. If the words are beginning to slip past without meaning, then let them, because that is the most natural thing in the world at this hour. You are not meant to stay here in sharp awareness. You are meant to sink, to soften, to become as quiet as the distance between Jupiter and its farthest moons, to become as peaceful as cloud bands seen from afar, to become as weightless as ring dust in shadow. So let the last soft light of Jupiter grow dimmer now. Let the moons fade with it. Let the great planet turn once more in silence, and then become only a faint bronze memory beyond the curtain of sleep. Let the darkness close around you kindly, warmly, completely. And as this final outro disappears into the velvet quiet, let yourself disappear into it too, not lost, only resting, not falling, only floating, not ending, only drifting into the deep, still, beautiful sleep that has been waiting for you all night. This final chapter continues the same attached, sample-guided, long-form sleep story structure you provided earlier.